Well, another year, and here we are once again. Nick Guzman and James Birle for WFUV Sports. Our coverage of the New York Red Bulls came to a close for the 2023 season because of their elimination in the first round of the playoffs to FC Cincinnati for the second year running. They have fallen to the hands of the orange and blue. And this time, it's been very, very interesting because now that Media Day has gone past us, there have been some massive, massive changes in the New York Red Bulls camp. So there's for us to go through here, Nick. But overall, your first impressions of the end of the Red Bulls season. They clawed their way into the playoffs. Miraculously, they were only above the playoff line for the final 2 minutes of the regular season, but they made it. They got one win over Charlotte in that wild card game, and they pushed Cincy all the way to penalties in the second game, eventually getting quote unquote swept in the best of three. But overall, a strong finish to an otherwise strange season. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, they won 4 out of the last 5 games to sneak into the playoffs. And I think the worry was that maybe sneaking into that 8th seed, that one of those last 2 seeds in the wild card would sort of maybe mask the problems that have surrounded this team and the structure of this team as a whole. But then we get to Media Day and it's sweeping changes, wholesale changes. I think a lot of fans are happy about. So I think it was kind of a best of both worlds scenario because this was not a very good season for pretty much all of it until that final stretch in the fall. But for the Red Bulls to squeak into the last spot, they give FC Cincinnati a run for their money in that first opening round. But then we also get the changes that need to come for this club because there is a lot of dysfunction going on, and the squad, the way it's built right now, doesn't seem like it's built in a way that could compete for MLS Cup. And some of the quotes from sporting director Joachim Schneider and from other people, it seems like everyone's on the same page that just because the playoff streak is alive and just because they squeaked in doesn't mean it's good enough.
Yeah, and let's dive into some of those issues that have been very much addressed. The club has made it very clear that the season was not good enough, despite the jubilation in making the playoffs at the end. But we got to go back to the very beginning of the season, and all the hype that was surrounded was really with one name at the front of it, and that name was Dante Van Zier. Boy, did he have a strange first season in New York, marred by controversy and injury and inconsistent play. He never really hit the ground running. The DP striker that was supposed to be the big, big name that the Red Bulls have been missing since the departure of Bradley Wright Phillips did not live up to the billing in no way. It is compounded by what happened in the 8th game of the season, his first MLS start in San Jose. He used a racial slur against the referee and was suspended for 6 matches after it. And that was the beginning of the end for the manager, Gerhard Struber. But that was before the season started. The hype around him and the knowledge of Lewis Morgan coming back with having scored 14 MLS goals, 18 all competitions from the season before, and returning Sean Nealis, Andres Reyes, John Tolkien all into the back line, it seemed like there was a lot of hype about the Red Bulls in general. Most pundits were picking them to be one of the higher playoff teams in the Eastern Conference within the 5th to 3rd range, really. And they never got going. Even when they got that first win against Columbus, they still really didn't hit the ground running for a while after that.
Yeah, and I think the absence of Lewis Morgan is something that you forget a little bit just because he wasn't there for pretty much the entire season, played just 5 matches. But he's such a big part of what this team tries to do moving forward or going forward in attacking sense. And I think when you think about Dante Van Zier as well, and the whole incident early in the season that led to his suspension, and even after that, it just kind of, you wanted him to be able to get some momentum going and get some momentum going in his play. And sort of that incident just made it so that couldn't happen at all. And even when he came back, he didn't necessarily look like what he was built to be. We saw flashes. We saw flashes in the Open Cup. We saw flashes at some points of the ability that he has, but he was sort of built to be the guy that was going to fix the New York Red Bulls goal scoring problems. And he didn't really do it. And a big question that we asked when we made this video last season was the Red Bulls just need to score goals, and they need to get people into this team that can score goals. And it seems like we're having a similar conversation again. And I think the way this season started for this Red Bulls team, I mean, you think about They got that first win against Columbus in March. And then after that, it wasn't until NYCFC in May for their second MLS win of the season. They started out incredibly slow, and the lack of goal scoring, the Dante Van Zier stuff had a lot to do with it. And I think the way this MLS season worked, when we had Leagues Cup, we had Open Cup as well, it seemed like just so many games were played that it's almost like you forget about the stuff that happened in March and April. But, and also because the MLS playoffs and the format is so incredibly forgiving that you can get off to a start like that, where you win your second game in May and you're still able to sneak into those last two playoff spots. And then you can easily forget about just how poor of a start to the season it was. But this team really could not score goals until we really got to the summer. The first time that, in MLS play, looking at this team where I was like, okay, this is a free-flowing attacking, unit. That game against Atlanta in June, I believe, when they won 4-0. That's the first time where I thought, this team is showing some spark going forward. But besides that, it was a lot of shutouts, a lot of one-goal efforts. And I think this was a season where, yes, it got better as it went along once Troy Lesesne took the reins, provided a little bit of more stability to this team. But I think we definitely can't forget about, what happened in March and April and May and just how poor and lackluster it was.
Yeah, and let's talk about the change in managers. Because Gerhard Struber was brought in by Kevin Thelwell with the purpose, the then sporting director of the club, head of sport rather, with the purpose of being the main guy for the Red Bulls. He was supposed to work his way up through the ranks of Red Bull. Eventually, now he's with Red Bull Salzburg, of course. People have looked at that and sort of pinned it as an opportunity to criticize him for failing upward, but we're not here to say that. We're here to look at his time in New York, and his teams never really looked all that impactful on the attack. Kind of marred by the same sort of thing that they had all year and just their lack of scoring goals. And we look at the personnel, and they've got some talent in those areas, but Tom Birle played in every match this season. And we love Tom Birle, but you're not expected to score goals of that high caliber when he's your starting striker. You look at teams who score goals around the league. They have seasoned veterans, DPs, who are scoring goals at a high rate up there. And Dante Van Zier wasn't able to do that next to him. And the next man up being, whether it be Elias Manuel, who did have that hat trick in the playoffs, or Tom Birle, or Jan Hurtado, who came, Jorge Hurtado, who came for a brief time at the end of the season, and it is expected that his loan is extended. None of them showed flashes, more than flashes of anything in terms of output in the final third. And then you look into the midfield. Omir Fernandez led the team in goals this year, but you can't expect Omir Fernandez or even Luquinhas, another DP creative midfielder, to shoulder the burden of creating all of that in the attack. It simply, they need more pieces around there, and that's why it's exciting to hear that a player like Emil Forsberg of RB Leipzig is rumored to be linked to the New York Red Bulls in a DP deal. A player like that could really change things moving forward. But looking back on the season, Gerhard's teams never really looked like they could open the game up. And Troy Lesesne's teams, the numbers weren't much different, but they did end up winning more matches. They coming into it, they were bottom of the league, 9 points, 11 games. And Troy Lesesne's team turned that around. In the first week, they beat their biggest rival, or oldest rival rather, DC United in the Open Cup. They beat NYCFC, perhaps their biggest rival now, in the league play. And then they followed that up with a draw on the road and then a 2-1 win over Montreal. It looked like they were going to get some momentum going, but then things started to slow down a little bit in June. The international break didn't really help, but they gained momentum that they lost in those months of the year. And they really had to put it all together in the final few matches of the year to make the playoffs. But let's talk about the Leagues Cup a little bit. This run looked like it could have been a real chance for the Red Bulls. They ultimately came up against Philadelphia, lost in penalties. And that was the game where Lewis Morgan came on and injured, took a penalty for the purpose of his penalty abilities only. Didn't play at all in the match. Didn't play matches before that or after, was still held out. I've never seen anything like that. It was a gambit. It didn't pay off. But if they get past Philly in the round of 16, I think they had a real chance at qualifying for CONCACAF Champions League, because if they get to the semifinal, that's their trophy to win. Unfortunately, it became Messi's trophy, which was a great story for the sport in this country. But I think that Leagues Cup run really changed the way the Red Bulls looked at the rest of the season. Unfortunately, they hit another wall after that, but I thought that they were playing their best soccer in late July, early August.
Yeah, and it's nice to have a competition like the Leagues Cup where no matter how much you're struggling in MLS play, you can sort of just put a pause on that focus on an entirely new competition. You're starting from scratch. This is, Troy Lesane all the way. No more Gerhard Struber. No more of that lingering in MLS play from the beginning of the season. This is a new competition where you can sort of make something of it, and something that, it was a new thing for all these teams. But for the Red Bulls to, play the way they did, and, picking up the win against San Luis, they beat NYCFC in the round of 32, and then taking a very talented Philly Union team to penalties in the round of 16. And not a good year for the Red Bulls on penalties in terms of the penalty shootouts. But I think the Leagues Cup sort of provided just a nice break in what was a very chaotic MLS season, where a lot of things happened, a lot of moving parts. Troy Lesane came in. There was the whole Dante Van Zier thing. Just not a lot of stability during the MLS season. It was a nice sort of break from all the chaos to put a little run together. And, who knows what happens if you beat Philly on penalties. Then you go to the quarterfinals, and then, you never know. It's in a knockout tournament like that. So I think to have those positive performances in the Leagues Cup was really just a good thing for this team, moving forward throughout the rest of the MLS season. Although you didn't necessarily see it right away, coming out of the Leagues Cup break with not the best of form in late August and then early September. But then the team's able to go on that run, winning 4 of their last 5 to make the playoffs. But I think a big reason for that is sort of what the Leagues Cup provided.
Yeah, and I think it was during the Leagues Cup where we really saw Troy Lesane's vision for the team, for as strongly as it ever was. A little more attention to playing with the ball without abandoning the Red Bull system at all. Every game this season we felt like followed the similar formula, and that's because the Red Bulls turned every game into a Red Bull game. They made it difficult on the other team. They put them in under loads of pressure and in dangerous scenarios, but they couldn't turn those chances and that territorial advantage into goals. So that is clearly the issue at hand, and everyone around the team has noticed it, and that is what they're going to have to rectify. And really, they only put it together when they had to at the very end of the season to make the playoffs. But the real difference that was noticed between Troy and Gerhard was not that on the field, but it was rather cultural, and that's most of what the players echoed. They really appreciated his attention to those sorts of details, and the fans really noticed that too. I think the fans kind of really appreciated Troy, his candor with the media, and everyone around the team. And that was echoed in the end of season media day with Jochen Schneider and everyone involved. They all really did like Troy and appreciated the work that he did. But with the direction now that they want to go, it's Jochen Schneider who's making all these decisions. Gerhard Struber was brought in by Kevin Thelwell. Dennis Hamlet was brought in during the Jesse Marsch, Ali Curtis era. Now this is very much Jochen Schneider's team to put together. So let's take a look into the future for this team, really, with the rumors of Sandro Schwarz potentially being the manager, the former Moscow and Hertha Berlin manager, who actually really struggled in the Bundesliga but did really well in Russia, as well as some other names like Emil Forsberg being brought in potentially to help improve this team's quality, because they certainly do need more on the field. But that also meant that Dennis Hamlet, the former sporting director, left after 8 years with the club. He's been with the New York Red Bulls for a third, arguably, of its existence, roughly, give or take, and has seen them over the most successful eras of the club, although it's been kind of unclear what exactly his role was when they brought in higher-ups like Kevin Thelwell and Jochen Schneider. So I think this was probably the right time to move on, and this is sort of the reset that fans have been asking for a really long time. They wanted the Red Bull front office to be ripped apart, and it seems like, at least to a degree, that is beginning to start. Sandro Schwarz, we don't know if that's happening. We don't know if Emil Forsberg is happening. We have reason to believe that they will be. But what should the New York Red Bulls be looking for in a new manager? And Jochen Schneider has made it clear it's still going to look like a Red Bull team, but with that Red Bull element kind of leaving from the club, it feels like it's a new age entirely.
From what I've seen so far about Sandro Schwarz, you don't necessarily know if the rumors are true, but it seems like some of his tactics and what he's trying to build his team to do is similar to what we've seen in the past from Red Bulls teams. It seems like he likes to press, and he likes to sort of, that high energy style is sort of what he tries to get his teams to play like. So I think that's familiar. But I also think it's definitely a good thing that we're going, outside the Red Bull organization for a manager. I think that's key to get some fresh ideas in, because you can still play the Red Bull way, even, who knows what that means these days. I think the sort of definition's been a little skewed from the days of, Jesse Marsh, and it's hard to believe that that was like 8 years ago now from those days. But, I think in a manager for this Red Bulls team, Sandro Schwartz was somebody who didn't have the best of luck at Hertha, but it seems like a lot of that was above him, and that seems like a club that's broken structurally in terms of an upper management level that maybe wasn't given the best tools to succeed at Hertha. But I think no matter who the manager is for this Red Bulls team, I think moving on from Troy Lesesne was something that, yes, he did a good job in sort of providing stability after Gerhard Struber, and yes, he was, the record wasn't necessarily excellent, but I think, like you mentioned, how poor of a relationship Gerhard had with both the fans and the media towards the end after how he handled the Dante Van Zier stuff. Troy sort of mended that relationship. But I think if you want to take this team to the next level, which it seems like, based on what Joachim Schneider has said, after the season, they want to take that next step, which would be winning trophies, which would be challenging for MLS Cup and not just getting into the playoffs. I think you need a manager with some more experience than Troy Lesesne has managing at the top level. And I think whether or not it's Sandro Schwartz, I think that's sort of the level of coach that the Red Bulls should be striving towards. Someone who has, real legitimate top flight experience. And, he did some positive things at Mainz, and yes, Hertha didn't go so well. And he was all right at Dynamo Moscow, but I think the fact that he has that Bundesliga experience and experience coaching at the highest level will be key for this Red Bulls group, just to sort of take them, to another place beyond what Troy Lesesne could.
Yeah, and we'll know soon enough who the appointments go to. We're expecting the sporting director to be someone within MLS, according to Jochen Schneider, and the manager probably going to be coming from abroad. Jochen, using his networks, that his work in Germany, of course, has been extensive. So we're going to wait and see on those. They mentioned December or Christmas as a deadline to find those positions, so we'll know sooner rather than later. But as for the 2023 season, it was arguably their worst since 2009, one of the worst in club history. For many moments this year, this was the worst season in club history. However, it's capped off with 14 years straight in the playoffs. That's an MLS record, and they have seemingly a good enough core to, with a little more investment, build towards a successful season next year. I say that they're returning one of the better defenses in the league. It's unclear whether or not John Tolkien is going to go to Europe, but should he stay for at least until the summer, they're going to continue to have one of the best young stars in the league as well. Their midfield was pretty strong in terms of it centrally. Frankie Amaya and Daniel Edelman created a very good partnership. And if you bring in a guy like Emil Forsberg, perhaps one more striker, perhaps another defender for depth in the center back position, you have a really good team to build around, and that could compete. And with guys like Lewis Morgan and Dante Van Zier returning from injury, could Lewis keep his form from 2022? Could Dante find his form from Europe, then from Belgium, from Union SG, and bring it to MLS? I don't know. Sometimes it takes players 2 years to adapt to the league. There's a lot to be excited about moving forward, but is my optimism maybe for this team a little bit foolish given what's happened in every year of the club's history? Still no MLS Cup. What do you think this team would have to do to get to the next level? Is it bringing in another striker? Is it bringing in an Emil Forsberg? Or does something have to reset culturally do they have to abandon the Red Bull system? Is it that drastic, or maybe just a few more players here and there? I think they could really do something with just a little more investment, really.
I think they could too. And I think the big reason why you're so optimistic and why I'm optimistic too is because we haven't had, what that media day was, what Joachim Schneider said, the things that he said kind of made me want to run through a brick wall. Like, just the fact that it's not good enough, just making the playoffs isn't good enough. We want to challenge for trophies. We want to take a step to the next level. And then he does things, moving on from Troy Lesesne, and the Emil Forsberg seems like he's coming. Those are two like immediate things that back up the talk, because it's one thing to just say that you want to take the step to the next level, and then it's another thing to actually actively take the steps to do so. And I think adding in a player like Emil Forsberg, who, it's the Red Bulls recruitment in recent years, it's been, getting those, young players from South America, sort of, whether it's Luquinhas, whether it's Elias Manuel, guys like that who, are very talented, but maybe aren't necessarily as proven or established as someone like Emil Forsberg, who's been to World Cups, who's been all over the place for Sweden, who I think after that, I believe it was 2016-17 season with Leipzig, you thought this guy has a chance to be like one of the best attacking midfielders in the world. He hasn't quite kept up the form from that season, but he's still, got plenty of goals and assists and been a big part of what Leipzig has built, over the last 6-7 years. So I think that's a very exciting signing. I don't necessarily think that you need to tear everything down and do a hard reset. I think there were things this season that happened that were really just unlucky. And I think that's Lewis Morgan getting injured. I think the Dante Van Zier stuff lingered more than people would care to admit. Like, that's a hard thing as a locker room to overcome when, your fans are walking out of the stadium and there's this sort of turmoil with your current manager and Gerhard Struber. You switch managers midseason. It's a lot of stuff that happened this year. It doesn't necessarily excuse how lost this team looked in front of goal for a lot of the season. But I think if there's a season where there's just stability, you bring in a new manager, he's able to employ his ideas. I think there's a lot of players in this team that are still useful for the Red Bull system and the way they're trying to play, no matter who the new manager is. I think possibly another striker could be necessary, because to me, someone like Dante Van Zier isn't going to be the guy who's like leading the line by himself. I feel like you would need someone up there with him, and that's when he'd be at his best. And I think you bring in Forsberg, maybe bring in another attacking player, maybe like a true 9 who's going to score those goals for you consistently. And I think there's really no reason why this Red Bulls team can't make the next step forward. And I saw another rumor, that Peter Galassi from Red Bull Leipzig, that's a rumor. I like Carlos Coronel, but, you're always looking to improve wherever you can. I think most Red Bulls fans like Coronel too, despite some mistakes that he's made over the years. But I think, to answer your question, no, I don't think they have to tear the walls down, and I don't think they need to blow everything up. I think it's clear that Schneider has a vision for moving this club forward, and I think this is the first offseason really in a while where right after the season, moves have been made, like, quickly. Like, the MLS playoffs are still going on, and there's all this happening in Red Bulls land. And I think it's refreshing to see the front office sort of taking initiative really quickly and trying to make these changes happen, because I think they understand that, even from beyond just an on the field perspective, things with this club in terms of attendance and interest in the New York marketplace hasn't been the best, and it's been going down over the years pretty steadily. The best way you fix that is by creating a on the field product that wins, and that wins games. It's not by bringing in big names from Europe. It's by bringing in, it's by putting a winner on the field. You put a winner on the field, the other stuff will come. And I don't think you need to tear everything down. I think bringing in Forsberg, bringing in a new coach, maybe another attacking player. And then I think a big thing is also, what's John Tolkien going to do with his career? It seems like the next logical step in his progression. He's gotten better every year in MLS. It seems like Europe's the next logical step for him to go. But when's that move going to happen? Because if it happens if it happens over the winter, then you've got a left back position to fill as well. It's not just any left back position. I mean, John Tolkien was a big part of what this team does going forward, and just in terms of connecting with the fans as well, that'd be a big hole. I think everyone expects him to move on. It's just a matter of when. But for the New York Red Bulls, I think there's reason to be very hopeful. And because we haven't gotten, straightforward answers like that from the front office saying that straight up, this wasn't good enough. And I think because they're being so open about it, and because they're actively doing things to try to change that, why not be hopeful? Why not?
If one thing, 2024 will look different. We don't know if it's going to be a success yet. We don't know which players are going to remain, which are going to go. We haven't had the roster moves announced yet. They're the only team of the playoff teams that have been eliminated not to do it yet. So that's one thing they are delaying. But that's because they're taking a good hard look at the club itself and trying to make those wholesale changes, like you mentioned. I think it's probably for the better, and I think it's a very exciting time to look at the New York Red Bulls. Before we go for the year, um, I want you to pick an MVP of the season, and I'm going to go first. I'm taking the man you mentioned briefly, Carlos Coronel, because while he doesn't always get all the plaudits, he absolutely was consistently the most important player on the field for me in so many games, down the stretch especially. That big save in the first half against Nashville, he pushes Hani Mukhtar's shot off to the post. Full extension, world-class save. That save doesn't happen. The Red Bulls don't go to the playoffs. There's so many other moments too. Even in the Charlotte game when it was still close, he made massive saves in the first half. Yes, the Red Bulls took a commanding lead, but they don't do that without his help. He's become a leader for this team now as well. The way he handles himself in front of the players and with the club, they all look to him in times of trouble. Yes, he may swing and miss on a ball out of the box here or there. Not terrific with his feet in those spaces, but he is absolutely massive. I think in shot stopping ability alone, he's easily top 5 in Major League Soccer. One of the best goalkeepers in this league, and that's coming from a team that has a rich goalkeeper history. You know, from Tim Howard, Tony Meola to Luis Robles. The Red Bulls and Metro Stars have had terrific goalkeepers in their past, and Carlos Coronel has fully earned his place among the best with the rest of them. So I have to pick him. I know there's so many others like Omir Fernandez, J.M.I. Tolkien, and even either of the center backs, Sean Nealis and Andres Reyes, were really immense this year. So who are you going with?
I'm taking John Tolkien. I think this was really the first year where he was an exciting prospect previously, and he did great things on the field and was one of the best Red Bulls players in previous years. But I think this season he really took that step to be, that guy, the guy taking penalties, the guy taking free kicks, the guy who's a leader, who connects with the fans and is really just all about what this Red Bulls team is. He's homegrown. He's from the area. He's only 21 years old. And I think for him to take that step this season, his assist numbers were way up this year, getting into the attack. I think JMI was the one, he was consistent all season long. And I think that's not really what you can say about a lot of this Red Bulls team, and just provided so much stability down that left-hand side. To me, it's John Tolkien.
Yeah, he really embodies the club spirit. He was their guy this year, and you hope he doesn't leave so soon, but you would understand if he did. So it's another season that I would say is mostly disappointing, although it ended in a bright way, and there's a lot of hope for the future. But that is all we have for you on the New York Red Bulls in 2023. We will see what happens when they appoint a new coach, appoint a new sporting director, and make those roster moves, make those announcements. We got a lot to learn, got a lot to discover, and we will see you guys next year in 2024 with Major League Soccer, right around the corner. That's still going on. The playoffs are still happening, but we're not looking at that. We're looking into 2024 when we get back to Red Bull Arena in Harrison, New Jersey. Any final thoughts, Nick, before we wrap this up for 2023?
I just think there's genuine reason to be optimistic. This was not a good season. I think you can't sugarcoat that. Yes, they made the playoffs. They beat Charlotte. It was a lot of individual mistakes in that first leg against Cincinnati, or not first leg, but it's best of 3 series. Game 1,
Whatever.
I guess. Whatever. In game 1. And then you go to penalties in game 2. But the majority of this season was not good enough, and I think Red Bulls management realizes that. I think there's a lot of reason to be hopeful in 2024. Although this team, it's the same thing. You keep coming back and they keep hurting you. But I think there's genuine reason to be hopeful. I'll end with that.
Thanks again to WFV Sports, Bobby Chaffardina, for giving us the privilege to be the New York Red Bulls beat reporters. Another great year, even though it didn't always look great for the club, but we enjoyed every minute that we got, both at the stadium, talking to players and coaches, everything involved. We thank you so much to everybody, and we hope to see you very, very soon covering the club in 2024. Thank you guys for watching.